Hi guys, it's Quinn here. If you enjoy my videos, consider hitting the like button. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. Scientists believe that at some point during human history, the population had been reduced to just 1,000 reproductive adults. In the year 70,000 BC, humans almost entirely vanished from the face of the planet itself. According to scientists, near extinction has occurred at least 3 times over the course of humanity's 100,000-year history. The dilution of mankind to so few humans magnifies the impact of all human actions. In Cixicin's Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, humanity is tested many times, but there is no single greater near-extinction event than the Singer's Dimension Strike. We've discussed the Crisis Era, the Deterrence Era, the Post-Deterrence Era. In this video, we will discuss the Broadcast Era, the era directly following the crew of Gravity and Blue Space's decision to activate the Universal Broadcast System, freeing the human race from Trisolaran oppression, while inadvertently revealing the location of the Earth to the inhabitants of the Dark Forest. And the Bunker Era, which followed the return of Tianming, whose brain had been sent off into the vacuum of space centuries earlier. Trisolaris had already met its fate after its location was revealed to the Dark Forest. The world and all its inhabitants had been annihilated, save the Trisolaran fleet who escaped into deep space. Humanity had known that the Earth was doomed, but something gave them hope that survival was possible. The cryptic stories of young Tianming. Young Tianming's return to our solar system would seem as the arrival of an angel of salvation to the remaining humans on Earth. To understand who Tianming is, his direct tie to the sword holder Cixin, and how these events came to be, we have to go back to a long-forgotten program enacted during the Crisis Era, the Staircase Project. Part 1. The Staircase Project. In the eyes of historians, the Staircase Project was a typical result of the ill-thought-out impulsiveness that marked the beginning of the Crisis Era. A hastily conducted, poorly planned adventure. In addition to the complete failure to accomplish its objectives, it left nothing of technological value. The space technology that eventually developed took a completely different direction. No one could have predicted that nearly 3 centuries later, the Staircase Project would bring a ray of hope to an Earth mired in despair. During the Crisis Era, humanity made leaps and bounds in terms of innovation and technological progress, even with Trisolaran sophons stifling them. The Staircase Project was first viewed as a waste of resources, later as a source of hope. But by examining the text, we see that it was in fact a dire mistake on the part of humanity. No one ever discovered exactly how the Trisolarans intercepted and captured the probe carrying Tianming's brain, but it is revealed that this is what ultimately gave the aliens the upper hand against humanity during the Deterrence Era. Tianming himself had designed the droplet attack against humanity. The spin-off book Redemption of Time goes into detail about what happened to Tianming during his time among the Trisolarans, wonders, horrors, and all. We will definitely discuss Redemption of Time in its own video at some point in the future, as it was approved by Cixin, but not considered an official part of the canon by some. The Staircase Project had been enacted around the same time that Liu Ji became a wall-facer. The original goal of the Staircase Project had been to launch a human toward the Trisolaran fleet at 1% the speed of light. That person could serve as a diplomat between the two worlds, while also gathering intelligence. Cixin had been an engineer working for the project. Thomas Wade, who led the project, eventually decided that based on the assumption that the Trisolarans could in fact regenerate the body, it would be better to find someone to euthanize and send only their brain. At the time, Tianming was terminally ill. Cixin convinced him to volunteer for the program. The book acknowledges that this project was foolish, but it's meant to reflect the many foolish things that humans have done throughout time, which are only seen in a clearer light through the lens of history. Even if their plan had initially gone as expected, once Tianming's brain actually approached the Trisolarans, it was bound to go wrong. But of course, the initial portion of the plan didn't even go well. When the probe is launched, there is a malfunction. Tianming's brain is launched off course into deep space, seemingly lost forever. One of the cables holding the sail to the staircase probe had broken near the orbit of Jupiter. The craft had deviated from its planned path, and the Earth, deprived of its flight parameters, lost it to the endless depths of space. If the Trisolarans had been able to intercept it later, they must have had its flight parameters after the cable broke. Otherwise, even the advanced Trisolaran technology would have been incapable of locating such a small object in the vastness of space outside the solar system. The most likely explanation was that the Sophons had followed the Staircase Project probe at least through its acceleration leg to gather its final parameters. Part 2. The Return of Tianming. During the broadcast era following the destruction of Trisolaris, the remnants of the Trisolarans reveal to humanity that they have young Tianming in their custody. Apparently, the Trisolarans had treated him like an honored guest. They had given him this final opportunity to speak with Cixin, who he had been infatuated with for many years before leaving Earth. But in truth, this was Tianming's opportunity to attempt to save humanity from destruction. The Trisolarans knew several secrets of the universe, which humanity did not, but they had no interest in humans learning those secrets. The communication between Tianming and Cixin was heavily monitored by the Trisolarans, so Tianming provides his secrets through the use of multi-layered fairy tales. This was the only way he was able to avoid alerting the Trisolarans to what he was doing. One day in a special video we might go into the specific details of Tianming's stories, but for the purposes of keeping this video flowing, I'll just sum up the relevant information that was gathered from those stories, as the tales themselves are quite lengthy and complex. The secrets he reveals essentially boil down to a single truth. There is, in fact, a way for a civilization to survive in the Dark Forest. Humanity worked extremely hard to decipher his stories, but they never fully managed to. The stories revealed that light speed could actually be attained through curvature propulsion, which would allow the warping of space. The other key secret humanity managed to reveal was that it was possible for a civilization to reduce the speed of light in a specific area of space. This would make it so that they could never escape their own star system. They would exist within a black domain, having no effect on the space outside. To the outside universe, it would appear as a mote of darkness floating amongst infinite darkness. The idea of building light-speed ships intended to allow escape from the solar system brought up the same issues as escapism did earlier during the Crisis era. Not everyone would be allowed to escape. Likely only the ultra-wealthy would be allowed to flee the solar system, venturing out into the cosmos while the rest of them awaited death. The populace heavily resented this idea, and eventually all research into curvature propulsion was banned. Cixin realized that this decision may doom humanity, and in her guilt for allowing deterrence to be destroyed, she gives away her personal wealth to Thomas Wade, who, assembling a team, was to continue to develop the technology in secret. As time continues, Earth is mostly evacuated. Humanity invests heavily in space cities. The artificial light sources could hide in the shadow of Jupiter and Saturn and potentially escape any photoid attack. Now they could only wait. Cixin goes into hibernation for another 60 years and is only awakened after Wade gets into a standoff with the government. Wade has continued to develop curvature propulsion technology and has now produced an antimatter weapon, which the government saw as an immense danger. Once awakened, Cixin demands that he stand down. The government shows no mercy to Wade. He is executed. A depressed Cixin decides to return to hibernation. She knows that this is twilight for humanity, the final hours. When she was awakened again, another 60 years later, the long-awaited attack was underway. If it had been a photoid, then humanity would have had a chance. Within their space cities, they could have protected themselves by hiding amongst the gas giants. But even a photoid, like the one which took out the Trisolarans, could not compare to the weapon sent into our solar system. Part 3. Singer. Humanity had been warned that this weapon would come. It was the final secret in Tianming's fairy tales, the only one which they had not been able to fully decipher. The warning related to a dimension strike. It was a distant world which had noticed them. This mysterious, distant, and unimaginably powerful alien world had long ago made the decision to go on the offensive. and they had technology of a greater magnitude than any humanity had ever previously dreamed of. The world itself was currently engulfed in a war between its homeworld and its fringe world, some undefined time earlier. The homeworld could not coexist with the fringe world, and one of the two would have to be destroyed. We can discuss more details about this civilization in future videos, as they are also heavily expanded upon in the spin-off novel Redemption of Time. The lone individual named Singer, whose task it was to watch the universe for signs of intelligent life, had been the one to discover traces of humanity, which they named the Star Pluckers. First, the other location had broadcast a message via primitive membrane. The low-entropy entities of that world clumsily plucked their star. Singer decided to call them the Star Pluckers, like the ancient bards of the homeworld plucking the strings of the rough country zither to send out their message. It was this message that contained the self-decoding system. Although the self-decoding system was primitive and clumsy, it was sufficient to allow Singer to see that a subsequent message sent out by the dead 3-star world followed the same encoding scheme, apparently an answer to the first message sent out by the Star Pluckers. This was already inconceivable, but after that, the Star Pluckers responded again. Interesting. Very interesting. Singer had indeed heard of low-entropy worlds that possessed neither the hiding gene nor the hiding instinct, but this was the first time he had seen one. The communications between humanity and Trisolaris had in fact been noticed, all the way back to the first time Yawinji responded to Trisolaris. But this alone wasn't enough to reveal the location of the worlds. However, it did reveal that the distances between the two worlds were very short. This meant that if one world was exposed, the other world would be as well, and eventually humanity was exposed. Ultimately, there was nothing they could do to stop it. Even without Singer, some other low-entropy entity would have noticed them. It was just a matter of time. Or perhaps they had noticed them, but decided that a low-entropy group that didn't possess the hiding gene wasn't much of a threat, and cleansing them was more trouble than it was worth. But that would be a mistake, a terrible mistake. Broadly speaking, if low-entropy entities like these Star Pluckers really didn't have the hiding gene, then they would not be afraid of exposing their own presence, and they would expand and attack without fear. At least until they got killed. However, as applied to this particular case, the situation was more complicated. The first 3 communications were followed 9 time grains later by the coordinate broadcast. Then 60 time grains after that, there was another long membrane coordinate broadcast from somewhere else, pointing at the dead 3-star world. The chain of events painted an uneasy picture, a picture that indicated danger. The cleansing against the dead 3-star world had happened 12 time grains ago, so the Star Pluckers must have realized that their own position had been revealed. Their only choice was to shroud themselves in slow fog so that they would appear perfectly safe and no one would bother them. But they hadn't. Maybe they didn't have the ability. Singer is somewhat perplexed by the actions of Earth, but nonetheless recognizes the danger that they could potentially possess. The potential danger is all that matters in this circumstance. The only thing left was cleansing. Singer took a mass dot out of the magazine again, then realized that he couldn't use a mass dot to cleanse the Star Pluckers. Their planetary system had a different structure than the Dead World system. It possessed blind corners. Using a mass dot might leave something behind, thereby wasting effort. He needed to use a dual vector foil. As he continued to sing, Singer picked up the dual vector foil with a force field feeler and carelessly tossed it at the Star Pluckers. Singer had casually made the decision to destroy our solar system because that simply was their function. They were not an exceptional or especially respected member of their own civilization. Nonetheless, they were the destroyers of ours. Part 4. The Deadliest Weapon in the Universe. Humanity had been prepared for a mass dot attack, but the aliens had not sent a photoid, but instead, they had sent something infinitely more deadly. Why aren't we entering Jupiter's shadow? AA pointed to the combined city outside the porthole. There's no point. The bunker is useless, Chao Bin said, lowering his eyes. How far is the photoid from the sun? Shangxin asked. There is no photoid. Then what have you found? Chao Bin gave a wretched laugh. A slip of paper. The dual vector foil, when activated, would cause all matter it came into contact with to collapse into a lower dimension. Only an object moving at light speed had the potential to escape a dual-vector foil once activated. The advanced warning system had discovered the unknown object sweeping past the edge of the Oort cloud at close to the speed of light. This was the first time that humans within the solar system had observed another alien civilization other than the Trisolarans. The object was not headed directly towards the sun, and it emitted weak gravitational waves, which was the only way they had been able to detect it in the first place. When the projectile was about 150 AU from the sun, the gravitational waves it emitted began to rapidly decrease in frequency. The advanced warning system discovered that this was due to its deceleration. Within a few days, the projectile's velocity went from light speed to 1/1000th of light speed and continued to decrease. Such a low speed meant that it wasn't enough to threaten the sun, which provided further comfort. In addition, at this speed, human spacecraft could keep up with it. In other words, it was possible to send out ships to intercept it. The object simply resembled a slip of paper, pure white surface, slightly bigger than a credit card, but so thin that its thickness could not be measured. Eventually the slip disappeared entirely and began its deadly job. The entire solar system would be compressed into 2 dimensions. It could not be stopped. Close to 1 million people had escaped Europe 6 via the emergency exits. Now, caught by the 3-dimensional space around them collapsing into 2 dimensions, they fell toward the plane like a swarm of ants caught in a waterfall. A majestic rain of people fell onto the plane, and the 2-dimensional human figures in the city multiplied. Flattened persons took up a lot of area, though still minuscule compared to the vast 2-dimensional buildings, and resembled tiny, barely man-shaped marks in the immense picture. The entire solar system would be flattened. This was the ultimate Dark Forest attack. In my previous video, The Terrifying Mystery of the Fourth Dimension, we discussed the scene in Death's End where the crew of Blue Space and Gravity encounter fragments of the fourth dimension. The tomb that they are able to communicate with tells them that the sea that is the fourth dimension was drying, but that the fish who had dried the sea had gone to land before they had done it. Land refers to the third dimension. In the chapter in Death's End that introduces Singer, it is mentioned that his entire species would soon transform themselves somehow into 2-dimensional beings. Has the homeworld decided to transform into 2 dimensions? Singer asked. Of course, the Elder already knew the question. The Elder did not answer, which was also an answer. If the rumor was true, then it was a great sorrow. Singer could not imagine such a life. On the Tower of Values, survival ranked above all. Once survival was threatened, all low entropy entities could only pick the lesser of 2 evils. This would be the only way to ensure the survival of their species long-term in the universe, because as I have stated in other videos, once a dimension strike like the one that took place in the human solar system begins, it can never be stopped. And dimension strikes had already been committed countless times throughout the history of the third dimension. The third dimension was disintegrating due to this fact, and eventually everything would collapse into 2 dimensions. It is implied that Singer's race may have once existed in the fourth dimension, and that they are one of the races responsible for the destruction of the fourth dimension. As the solar system collapses, only Shang-Xin and the character AA are able to escape the devastation. The technology developed by Thomas Wade had continued to be worked on in secret. A single light-speed ship had been created unbeknownst to the vast majority of humanity. Luoji, now extremely old, chose to stay behind among the last artifacts of humanity on Pluto. He communicates with Shang-Xin and AA as they exit the solar system. Shang-Xin knew that she had no choice but to live on. She and AA were the last 2 survivors of human civilization. Her death would mean the death of half of all that was left of humanity. Living on was the appropriate punishment for her mistake, but the course ahead was blank. In her heart, space was no longer black, but colorless. What was the point of going anywhere? Where should we go? Shang-Xin muttered. Go find them, Luoji said. His image was even more blurred now, and only black and white. His words illuminated Shang-Xin's dark thoughts like lightning. She and AA looked at each other and immediately understood who them meant. Luoji continued. They're still alive. The bunker world received a gravitational wave transmission from them 5 years ago. It was a short message and didn't explain where they were. Halo will periodically hail them with gravitational waves. Maybe you'll find them. Maybe they'll find you. Luoji's black and white image disappeared as well, but they could still hear his voice. He said one last thing. Ah, it's time for me to go into the picture. Safe travels, children. Shangxin and AA watched as the entire solar system was compressed into a two-dimensional picture of itself. The transmissions they received carried the dying voices of all humanity, until slowly there was only silence. Luoji had suggested that Shangxin seek out the members of Blue Space and Gravity, but she would head in another direction. Tianming, before his brain left the Earth, had gifted Shangxin with the star, a gesture of love in his mind. She knew that Tianming still existed out there somewhere in the void. She would head for their star, S74390E2, and hope to find him there. Like several times before in human history, mankind had been diluted into very few individuals. Whether or not the human race would survive would depend on how well they would be able to navigate and hide within the dark forest. In future videos, we will discuss the Galaxy era and beyond. What becomes of humanity in the end? Do we encounter the remnants of the Trisolarans again? There's actually a lot more to explore with this series. If you want more cool science fiction videos like this one, check out my channel and make sure you like and subscribe for more Quinn's ideas. Just a heads up for those of you that may be interested, my next graphic novel, The Lie Behind the Star, is launching February 2023. You can sign up now to get on the email mailing list to get notified as soon as it launches. More information on my website, link in the description. Thank you guys so much.